Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Droning Company's official podcast. We're calling this podcast Untitled because we don't have a clever title for it quite yet. But the point is, we're here to talk about drones. We're here to talk about drone technology and the industry as a whole. I'm your host, Chris Fravel, joined by co-host, also host, Jon McBride of the Droning Company. Jon, it's only been a few days since I've seen you last, but it feels like an eternity.
It does, man. When you're really having a good time doing stuff, and of course, get in front of you and the whole team in person for the first time, and also like vanning together, eating together, living together in the same Airbnb. It does seem like a while after you spent so much time in just a couple of days. Yes, no doubt.
If there's one thing I learned hanging out with you and then the rest of the team, we had Tim Brazel, we had Sam Karp, we had Hudson Mendoza, we had Stuart Smith. After hanging out with you guys for like 5 days straight, I really learned that we could very easily pitch a reality TV show to MTV, and I think we'd get some pretty good ratings on it.
I agree. I agree. I think again, you get all of us drone dorks together, and we have a good time. I know you've been doing this for a long time, and I know I've got a lot of things that just kind of hang around in there. But even at conversations we were having at the Airbnb, and you and Sam, Tim engaged in what, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, Jon. Learning new things. And that's what this is all about, is learning new things and what it's all, why we do what we do for what we love. So, I thought it was very awesome that you guys were so engaged and listening and just battery care and all this. Just, wow, wouldn't have thought it that way.
Yeah, no, on the plane ride to San Diego, which if you're not familiar, Jon and I are talking about AUVSI. We spent a week together in San Diego. On the plane ride there, Sam Karp and I rode together. Sam looked at me and he said, "I'm really excited to hang out with Jon." And I was like, "Oh, I could ask you why, but I can already sort of assume. But you tell me why you're excited to hang out with him." And he just said, "I'm excited to learn from somebody that's been doing it like 3 or 4 times longer than I have." And that's really an opportunity that I think all of the younger guys there took advantage of, and that's why we're appreciative of you being there. But we hope that we kept you on your toes too.
Oh, of course. Like you said, the one thing is that when I get into an event like that, there's no doubt that everybody wants to come up and talk to me, just like Sam. They want to be able to hang out with me, ask questions from me. And I don't always, I'm humble enough to know I don't always have every answer for everybody. But, yes, my experience over time and the different things I've done and the different equipment I've used, different customers we've had, you build up a lot of that experience. But I really did enjoy, the whole show, AUVSI itself. It's always a good bonding time. You get a lot of people that are new and some of my old friends that I've known in this industry for nearly a decade. Adrian Doko, Vic Moss, Kenji Suehara, all these guys that I've known that at the beginning, everyone kind of asked me questions at the beginning. Even these guys were just like, "Hey, I'm calling you because I've got a few questions about the drones. I don't know much about it," and it's great to see that these types of people have moved up the chain and now are the knowledgeable people in their own, discipline, if you will. They've become that, and they're the go-to guys. It doesn't have to be. So thank you, everyone, for taking pressure off of me because it does help. But again, when I get there and everyone wants to say hi, selfies, pictures, it's always the deal.
You got to do it. You got to do it. And so to sort of get into it here, today's episode, the first episode, the inaugural episode of this podcast. Again, this is Chris Fravel, the Drone Geek, and Jon McBride from the Droning Company. What we want to talk about is our time at AUVSI, because we spent 4 days going to this trade show. 3 of the days were the actual trade show, and we had 1 prep day. And Jon, you and I saw a lot of stuff through the show. And as we sort of bounced ideas off of each other at the end of each day, we came up with a list of things we really wanted to talk about and recap here on the podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and put the ball in your court. I know you have a few things you definitely want to address and sort of bounce off of me, and we can sort of bounce back and forth off of those.
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to talk about the show in general. So this is my 10th show, not consecutive because I missed one in the many years that I've been attending AUVSI. And, at the very beginning, when I went there the first time in 2014, there was a lot of tons of military exposure. We had, of course, the normal guys, Bell, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, all of these guys came in. but there was also other robotic and larger robotic stuff, so internal stuff. But it was definitely military-ish focused. The only guys that were there that were displaying at the time was myself at AUVSI. We had Stampede, who is now Exertis, if you know who they are. They're a distribution company that distributes product, Exertis Alamo, but they originally started as Stampede. And then what was really interesting is they had 3DR there, but no staff from 3DR. It was just a little kiosk sitting in the corner, literally just grab a pamphlet with a not even a solo in there. It was just this stand, how we've grown exponentially to kind of look at how many companies are now involved that makes it much smaller. And like I said, even then the boosts were really big because there was not as many, people, not as many companies, at least from what I observed. Sure. The following year, we started to see a little bit more drone activity, more dealers, manufacturers. And then I think it was that third year that I showed up that we definitely had DJI, as a staple there. We had Autel showing up, a couple years later. And then you had some of the staple companies, drone manufacturer staple companies. But as again, we came into Boston Dynamics, all of a sudden putting things out there and them showing up at this show. So what it's done is, through the 17, 18, and 19 up until COVID, we had a really big grand, amount of people coming together at AUVSI to show unmanned tech and unmanned capability. If you look at the organization itself, they have, their own CEO, board members, all of that is all there. And then you have a breakdown of all of the different groups of people in various parts of the country that you join the chapters and you're part of, membership, all of that, Sure. And they help support, in some cases the regulation side and things, but their core business is not Expo. I just wanted to make that clear. They do not, it's not Expo. That's not what AUVSI is, but they get a good gathering of people together, and which is fantastic. So,
absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad that you shared that because, I don't think a lot of people realize what AUVSI is. They do think that it's just, an organization that puts together that trade show, the Xponential trade show, has a few chapters that do smaller shows throughout the year. But the big one, the big Gahona is the Xponential trade show. So, there are a lot of different components to that trade show. I mean, you look at how it's evolved over the past 10 years. You look at the people that have been participating since COVID and how things have even changed in the last 3 to 4 years. And it's sort of wild to see just how much the industry is shifting. One notable change that we've seen is that the absence of DJI at that show. You mentioned that DJI and Autel showed up at some point and started to show up as it grew. But no longer are we seeing DJI and Autel. This is the second year in a row that there's been no DJI presence in terms of an official presence or an Autel presence. So what's going on there? What's your interpretation of that?
Well, I did have a chance, myself and Stuart Smith, the CEO of Droning Company. Of course, Stuart was hell-bent to poke somebody in the eye, so we tried to do our best. Yes, he does. And we weren't playing a good cop, bad cop, but we were able to bring the CEO, Michael Robbins, in a very one-on-one conversation. It wasn't an interview. We weren't there to berate him on the decisions made. He's been I think he said it. He had been a member of AUVSI for 4 years. I think that's what he said, and then recently appointed the position of CEO. So, when you really look at AUVSI's position with DJI, they've not made much of a different position as many others that would be concerned about the inhumane things that have been going on in China. Mm-hmm. Those things then put them into a category called the entities list. Mm-hmm. Yes. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and look that up. There's a lot of countries and a lot of groups that are part of that entities list. And for this, and it has nothing to do for the sake of national security here. Absolutely nothing. What it has to do is that are they being a good player, for humanity in general. Now, to kind of defend DJI, they make equipment. And if the CCP or the government of China decides to buy that equipment or get it and then uses it in a nefarious or, hurting humans kind of manner, that's where DJI has already put out many articles that we can't control what they do. We make the stuff, they buy it, we get it, we can't control it. And that's kind of their defense.
Right.
And equally, we have manufacturers in the United States to do the same thing. Yeah. They make this, we may not be seen as like doing bad things against humans, but, we make a tank and it shoots something and blows up 7 people. It still blows up 7 people,
And that's the thing that I'm seeing in the industry, whether it's DJI, whether it's Autel, or whether it's a Western manufacturer, insert Western manufacturer here. There is some truth and validity in what DJI is saying. They sell a product for an intended purpose. Look, we developed the Cart 30 to deliver supplies. Now, it just so happens that if you're smart enough, intelligent enough, you can learn how to strap a very large munition at the bottom of that cart and drop it. But they don't have any control over that. And that's the same response that I've heard from Western manufacturers. It's happening everywhere.
So if we circle back to that whole conversation with the CEO, that was kind of the generalized, message. And we know that, I have a lot of good friends that are part of the industry, people that didn't show up to AUVSI because of their position here. But if you look at other shows that also are fairly large shows that have also, dismissed DJI from showing or doing anything, this is inclusive of CES, the Commercial Electronics Show. Also, they had one of the largest booths, as big as Sony's booth or they had the largest booth there. And this last year, they were not allowed to display there either for the same reasons. And it wasn't because of data. It wasn't because of anything else. They have a board member of people at AUVSI who said, if that's the representation of the company, then we don't want them to be here. Now, again, take your opinion as you want to for you viewers that are watching this. I'm just stating the facts of the conversation I had with Mr. Robbins, and he was fantastic to talk to. Great guy. Unfortunately, he's a Navy guy, and being that I'm a Marine and all, but I didn't hold that against him too bad. But smart guy, really smart guy, and great to talk to. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Well, and not to keep beating a dead horse here because we've sort of outlined it, but what is interesting, and if you didn't attend the show, you didn't get a chance to see this, even if you did attend the show, you might have missed it if you left a little early. There was a protest going on in front of the show after day one. A lot of sentiment being shown, a lot of pro-Palestinian. That was a lot of what I saw when I was there. But the name that I heard thrown around a lot during that protest, as I was standing there waiting for my chauffeur to come pick me up, was actually Lockheed Martin. And so it's an interesting parallel and dynamic here is we're taking DJI and we're removing them from the show because they're on an entities list. And fine, do what you will. It's your show. But at the same time, we have another company over here called Lockheed Martin that is doing at a larger scale, creating technology that is actually intended to hurt and kill people. So it's an interesting conflict, and you don't know how to really address it because, again, at the end of the day, AUVSI does what they want.
I don't want to get too deep into the political things of things, but in the nature of that, but you're absolutely right. We're Americans. We always think we're doing right. Well, the Russians, they think they're doing right. The Chinese, they're going to think they're doing right. And we don't agree with half those people, so they must be doing it wrong. And so depending on, again, how the message is kind of received on who is doing it right or wrong, it's okay if those guys are, making, weapons to hurt people, and we have a bunch of people out here that don't agree with that. That's okay. It's their right to go and protest and be, unhappy with a company that makes things like that. And, again, that's a whole nother show on its own, but absolutely where my opinion goes with that. But, but again, I just wanted to be fair and say that, Mike Robbins gave us the time. He didn't have to. He talked to, again, Stuart and I for almost 45 minutes to an hour, kind of shed some light. I did question a couple of things in the conversation besides DJI, is that I noticed that there was a lot of still DJI aircraft down there on the floor that there's still a lot of companies that are building on that infrastructure that maybe you're not allowing them to come. But I was really questioning, like, when are you just going to, not allow, them to have stuff here at all, So there was dealers, there's manufacturers software, there's component makers, all kinds of different things that use DJI to build their stuff, and that still exists, there's
right.
there's a ton of them down on the floor.
Heck, we did, and it's coming soon on the channel if it's not out already. We did part of our DJI Avata 2 review on the showroom floor. Throughout the day, I was using DJI mics with the cameras that I was using to conduct interviews. So there's just a lot of DJI tech. And at this point, they're so far ingrained that you bring up a great point. What do we do here? Because a lot of people have built their businesses in one way or another on the back of DJI technology because it's that good.
Yes. Well, it's good. The ecosystem is good. The products they make are not just one trick pony stuff. It's, even though I can bash on some of the manufacturers out there, I said, hey, if a guy's got a Mavic and an M300 and a Dragonfish and who is he going to buy from to get all of that equipment together? If anything, you can go slightly outside and kind of still be okay. But if you have to have inspired flight aircraft to do heavy lift or do whatever, you have to have a quantum systems to do VTOL stuff. You have to have an X10 to do this. You have to have a Brink to do that. You're just inviting a lot of complication. And so I'm hoping, because I didn't really see any one company that made more than a couple of drones at all to solve the possibility of growing how DJI has done to move through their ecosystem and their plethora of different categories of equipment, because not all of it does the same thing, obviously, but you do need choices, and if that means you have to go to 10 different manufacturers to get the same fleet you currently run, that's going to be a tough one. It's just going to be a challenge, so the American manufacturer, sure, yes, we want to bolster that. We want to take pride in that. We want to see it grow and do, but we haven't got the one AJI, American GAI, to concentrate on. Just say, what other aircraft are you making? What other software are you doing? Whatever, just one place,
Yeah.
And it's not a monopoly, so to speak. It's just they've done really well with creating a number of different things, solving a number of problems where we've got, most manufacturers making one, maybe two drones at most, three maybe. Autel makes like 9 right now.
Yeah.
DJI has like 40,
Yeah. And you're right. It's not necessarily a monopoly situation. In fact, it isn't at all, because you do have many, many manufacturers out there that are selling different types of platforms and able to break into the market that way. And even with the things the way they are, there are some manufacturers that are Western based that are seeing some success, and in smaller increments, of course, sure, than DJI and Autel, but it's still happening. In fact, one example I have of like DJI not really running the table quite as much as people say. Don't get me wrong, they are at the top of the food chain, but I just recently had a commenter on my own YouTube channel leave a comment on a review that I did of the Autel Evo Lite and said that after he crashed his DJI Mini 3 Pro, he ordered the Autel Evo Lite instead. And, I told him, I said, you're going to get a better image overall out of that because you got a larger sensor on that camera. And there are a variety of other things it does better than the Mini series of drones. But there's definitely still competition in the industry. We're not at a monopoly phase here. But one of the things that we're seeing, and what I noticed, and I'm sure you shared the same sentiment, is when we were at this show, two things really stuck out to me. First of all, not as much new tech as there was in the past at different shows at Xponential, et cetera. But the other thing is a different type of vendor being there. Less drone manufacturers, more OEM and parts manufacturers. And I know you want to touch on both of those topics there. Let's start with the lack of new tech. Give me your thoughts. What are you thinking about, the lack of, I don't want to say lack of innovation because it's still happening, but nothing groundbreaking at this year's show, in my opinion.
No, there was, we're talking about, usually AUVSI is a great time to release new products. And, back to the kind of the pace in which a lot of these shows are spread out throughout the year, AUVSI, NAB, CES, Commercial UAV, these are all like announcement shows. but I didn't see anything really that like was just like, wow. And maybe the green machine thing, and we'll get to that.
We will.
But nothing really, really was like, wow, we've got a new blah. All of the technology there is likely, at least 6 months to a year old. They're still kind of showing the same thing. So I agree with that assessment. There wasn't really anything that I'm like, holy cow, this is going to change the world.
There was one thing, and now that you said that, I'm going to sort of retract the strength in which I'm going to say this. There was one thing that stuck out to me. I could kick myself for not remembering the company's name because I'd love to give them a shout out. Groundbreaking, no, because I've seen tech like this before, but to see it in person at that show was kind of cool. The humanoid robot. I don't know if you got a chance to see that walking around, the bipedal robot. That was really cool to see that walking around the show. But it wasn't moving in a way that I thought, wow, that is a huge leap in technology. It was sort of just puttering along, but it was still cool to see. Other than that, though,
I bet it was. I don't want to say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot, and I didn't see anything that we did our normal interviews and talked to a lot of people. I talked to Fleer, who I didn't know had bought, or Teledyne, who bought Fleer, who then also bought a company that does LiDAR, and they've been doing it longer than most of the LiDAR companies that we know. I said that in the interview. They've been around for a very long time. But I've never even heard of the company before until it was sitting there. Yeah. Drone Tag is another one I talked to that, kind of helping with the remote ID thing and hopefully integration into that. If you need it, great. But I didn't see any other major remote ID players there. They were kind of the only ones. And then you got a couple interviews.
I did, yeah. And before I move on to those, it is funny about the remote ID. I'm glad you touched on that because I don't know if you noticed this at CUAV last year, Commercial UAV Expo in Vegas. It was like an oversaturation of remote ID manufacturers. Like I think there were like 10 to 15 remote ID manufacturers or companies that manufacture drones, but also now have a remote ID product that they sell as well. Right. So, but other than that, there was only one drone or only one remote ID manufacturer at Xponential, which sort of blew my mind when I saw that after having just attended CUAV, at the end of last year.
Yeah. So what other, I know you did a couple other interviews as well. Was there anything else that was just kind of spectacular, kind of not but you did your due diligence and ran around and got a lot of information,
Yeah, absolutely. The one company I want to give a shout out to, it's a Pennsylvania-based company. They're out of Philadelphia, so I definitely want to give them a shout out, is Vertic. I'd seen them before. I've sort of gotten to know their technology. So in terms of new and mind-blowing, not necessarily something that I was shocked by to see it or shocked by in terms of its abilities, but really cool system. Essentially, they use a variety of servos in their drone motor system that they have that instead of having the drone pitch or roll to achieve movement forward, backward, left, or right, the motors actually pitch and roll. Mm-hmm. So instead of the whole drone's body moving, just the motors move, and it keeps the drone level.
No, I've talked to those folks before because I thought, what an interesting way to gather some data in which most traditional drones really have a challenge with. But it's very special, very niche. It's very, not an everyday flyer. No. And of course, it's not something that's manufactured in mass or scale, but the engineering behind that, yes, those guys are great to talk to.
Smart bunch of guys, and they've got really cool shirts too.
Yeah, very much so.
Aside from that, though, one place that we spent a lot of time, and it's because we had Sam Karp with us, who's our FPV expert here at the Droning Company. We spent a lot of time talking to FPV or FPV adjacent companies. And what that led us to, because a lot of them were sort of intermingled with one another, was actually some interesting conversations with a company called RJC America. Essentially, if you're not familiar with this company, they are a parts manufacturer. So the idea is, and the way they explained it to me, if you have a prototype or you need to scale out your prototype so that you can actually manufacture it in mass, you can use their company as a manufacturer for OEM parts, for complete builds, whatever the case may be. They are based out of Shenzhen, so not NDAA compliant in that regard. But that sort of brings me to the next point that we wanted to talk about. Was it's changing, or at least this year there was a change in who was at these shows. It's not so much this year, especially the drone manufacturers, as it is the parts manufacturers, which was an interesting change in my opinion.
Yeah. So, that was an observation. I just kind of was like, hey, that guy makes a widget to go into a widget, and that guy makes a widget to make a widget, and there was a whole lot of them. And so what that might mean is that some of these companies are now coming into an AUVSI type show to maybe show the supply chain capabilities of the United States. I don't know. Because I know that they've been here before, like I said, it's just a single component out of a plethora of things. Oh, by the way, you have to make your own software. By the way, you got to work with this. Oh, by the way, it doesn't quite just plug right in, but we have engineers to help you. And whether it's, flight architecture hardware, whether it's a data link system stuff, whether it's, data security, embedded things, there's a lot of little components all over the place with smaller booths that had that. And normally I just bypass those. I'm looking for generally that big drone sitting in the middle somewhere and going, hey, what the heck does that thing do? Because to me, that that's the full solution. So if you were, a Skydio, or if you were a whatever, blue manufacturer that happened to be there, or somebody like that this might have been a good opportunity to talk to these people for, post engineering and creation, that highlighted maybe some of that against supply chain. Maybe you didn't know that these things were available out there, instead of trying to create your own, know. And commonly we have the most common things. We have people that use the same architecture. I always say it, but we got a cube in there. Oh, you don't say. Oh yeah, but it's a blue, yellow, green, black, blah 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 blah. I'm like, it's just another pig wrapped around the cube, but you're stuck with the same architecture. I don't mean to be discredit those guys. They did a great job, putting this stuff out. But it's the same stuff, it's wrapped around a thing. So maybe again, people just aren't aware that a lot of these different components. That's way above my capabilities of understanding, but that's why I usually walk by them, as I don't really know what it is that they're making or what they're offering.
Well, it's an interesting parallel too with what the state of the industry. We're looking at these widespread bans on a federal and state level of Chinese tech, DJI tech. However, they're formatting this legislation, again, either on a federal or a state level. But what we're seeing, I think, is just a very clear answer as to where we're at as an industry. We don't have a lot of, as you said, complete solutions or complete platforms available at this point. So, if we take away those platforms that are complete, are ready to roll, and are efficient at what they do,
and being used right now, it isn't like it isn't like we're just creating something. People have had them for the last decade.
Yes. Yeah, and now you remove all of that, and this is sort of what we have. We have a handful of manufacturers that have been able to piece together technology that is passable, or maybe good, but at least passable in terms of its infield use, but they aren't at scale yet in their manufacturing. And then you've got, everybody else who are those parts manufacturers you're talking about. And I agree with you in that this show wasn't as exciting for me this year. And I say that with the utmost respect to the folks that took the time and the effort to put it together. But when I got there and I noticed that there weren't nearly as many drone manufacturers with their platforms ready to go and out on display, I was disappointed.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I did talk to, the CEO, AUVSI, Mr. Robbins, about was the attendance. I tried to get a picture of that, of what the attendance of actual people were there. They said somewhere around 7,000 to 8,000 people. So, okay, all right. Maybe a lot of people came in that first day. Maybe maybe there was, some people only came for 1 day or 2 days, but, as far as like countable people, I mean, I don't know where to actually fact check that, but 7,000 to 8,000 people. Well, as I was kind of walking, again, just John McBride observation is that I noticed a lot more green tags that had the exhibitor tags than I saw a lot of the more attendees full conference or VIP tags, on people. I saw a lot of people going in the doors, and I had to stand outside the doors, and the group that was outside the doors was a lot smaller than the group that was inside the doors when the conference opened.
A really good way to sort of get to the root of that, or to see some sort of a trend in terms of how many people are there, is just stick by the droning company teams that are going around filming these interviews and count how many times the camera gets walked in front of. Because this year, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, it was much less than it has been in years past.
Yeah, and I usually and typically go around to collect cards. I mean, if you've been watching, I mean, I'm kind of looking down because I've got my plethora of business cards that I come back and I'll categorize that as that was all of contacts that I met at this show, and but I can go over here from the last Com UAV, and that stack is 3 times as big as that. Of just people that wanted to make sure they gave me a card, talk to me, working with or talking to. So I'm not saying I'm skeptical of it, but I might be a little skeptical of the numbers. But altogether, it was a great show. I mean, I just thought it was a great show. Good, always good to see people, and always good to kind of refresh on what's going on. There's a lot of discussion, asking people, a little confusion, blue, not blue, this, that, and the other, and we still had probably at least 20, Chinese manufacturers there, component manufacturers, Hobby Queen. What was the other guys that you guys like?
We had Hobby Wing, we had Grapau, which is the tattoo battery manufacturer. We had RJC American. We had Radio Master. We had, that might be more than 20. We might have had like 30 there even.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are, component stuff, not necessarily drone manufacturers, but, parts and pieces of stuff. And, that's a pretty, common thing if you really look at it. Like I said, we just talked about all the other components that were there that might be sourced from the U.S., but you still had a great amount of people that were from China that, had motor speed controllers and things that I actually recognized, radios and things. I mean, like I said, some guy comes in, well, it does this, it's a widget, I don't even know what that is, but it was a very interesting observation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I got to ask your opinion flat out. And I just want to be clear, I'm asking for John's opinion, not a fact or a record of fact. Do you think that the perceived lack of attendance or the perceived inaccuracy of the attendance count had anything to do with the fact that the news got out that DJI was not invited to Xponential?
100%.
Yeah,
100%. I can name at least 15 companies that didn't come because of that. I could probably tell you, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you put a post out there, people are like, I'm not going. Well, if you tried to, find the analytics on how many people said they're not coming because of it, because of their position on it, I don't want to support it. I have no intention to support it. Yeah, there's probably hundreds of people that didn't show up because of it. I can't say thousands because of it, but who knows? I mean, we still 90% of the time as well. You have a lot of international people that come to AUVSI. And if you did have Chinese companies displaying, what I didn't see was a lot of Chinese, Malaysian, whatever it is, Taiwan, whoever they're coming from, Japan, I didn't see as many of those types of attendees that you typically see at an AUVSI. And again, I've gone to 10 of them. 9. I've gone to 9.
You did miss one.
Yeah, I missed one in all those years. So
you touched on a country that is interesting in this whole conversation, especially in the past year or so. Japan is. You touched on 2 countries. We're going to get to that other country towards the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
But the one that I want to talk about right now is Japan. company that was there at AUVSI is ACSL. And if you're not familiar with that acronym, ACSL is the company that is manufacturing the Soten drone, which has been marketed by that company as somewhat of a Mavic replacement. It's got a 1-inch sensor for its main payload, its RGB camera payload. It's got really great flight time. A lot of the specs check out on paper, but on top of that, it also has the ability, and this is what's being marketed, to swap out a variety of different payloads. So essentially, think you get your Mavic 2, but you also get the Mavic 2 Enterprise. You get the Mavic 2 Enterprise Thermal, as long as you buy those attachments. So from your perspective, and you've been in the industry a lot longer than I have, what do you think of this drone? What do you think of this company? And after seeing it in person, what's your opinion?
Well, Japanese make good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Sony is a great example of that.
Stationed there for a year. Not that they kind of snoozed on the drone stuff, because there was actually, I sourced a lot of stuff at the beginning, long before DJI, from Japan, in which I was getting stuff from that country. So it wasn't like they just didn't try to bolster manufacturing. Maybe, again, like pretty much the rest of the world, they didn't think drones were going to be such a big deal. They kind of let it slide a little bit, let it go, and oh, hey man, all of a sudden we got some manufacturers and engineers and people creating some things, and then create a company. I did want to give a shout out to two of those individuals that were there that I've known for a while, was Cynthia, CEO, and as well Francisco, who is kind of the tech guy. He was there at DJI, and so was Cynthia. But Francisco and I, being guys in the industry and understanding, I was like, hey, give me the real skinny on this thing. Give me what tech to
take
tech.
the marketing hat off and tell me what you think of this thing.
I believe it. And to be honest with you, when you have a company that is willing to admit its downfalls and things that it needs to work on, I love companies like that.
Yes.
I do not care for companies that tell you that it is the best thing since sliced bread and nothing is better than what we make. Francisco gave me the reality of we're not getting the best reports on those sensors. People want a little bit better optical capability. All of these are great to listen to, because and then have them recognize that. I think that is so important for a company that you work with in the future, especially with pieces of hardware, that can listen to your feedback and try to make small adjustments and changes as they go.
Absolutely.
And again, I don't care for the companies that say we got it and that's it. There's nothing better. And God forbid you say you make something better than DJI. No way. No way. So
I've got very limited feedback on the Soten drone, but the feedback that I have gotten, whether it's direct or just something I'm reading, has been hot and cold. There are some people that are pleased with it, not necessarily saying that it's ready to replace a DJI, but are pleased with where it's at right now. There are other people that are saying this is way behind, but I can't agree with you more. When I talk to a manufacturer that's able to sit there and say to you, hey, it's really not the best thing out there, but we're working on it. That to me is worth more than anything else a company can give me, because I know that's a marker of success.
Yes, and if they have the backing and the engineers, and this is a very small team in the United States, it's not a big, big support system and order all this stuff and everything else. But if you're displeased with the way it's currently flying or anything like that, or how it's currently engineered or performance, there's always room to grow. And the Japanese do a pretty good job with that. I met their whole team, their engineering team, or at least the people that were there from Japan, and great guys. We hang out with them at their event on Tuesday night, and it was great to just kind of mingle with those and kind of talk about what that. Now, I would like to get one, Francisco.
Wink, wink.
And Cynthia, you did say, I'd love to get one for a little bit more review.
I don't mean to stomp on John, but hey, listen, me too. That would be great. You could send me one, send John one. If you're going to send one, you might as well send another one, right? I mean, what's the point of not doing it?
I know people. I know people, Chris.
Hey, I interviewed Cynthia
Oh, well, that's okay. All right, fair.
No, but I agree. It's an interesting piece of tech. All joking aside, it would be interesting to get your hands on one, just because I do have experience with the Mavic 2 and the Mavic 3. And this is a drone that has been modeled at least after the Mavic 2. So to be able to compare and contrast the results that I've gotten from flying both of those aircraft would be really interesting.
Yeah, interchangeable payloads is something that, on a small UAS like that is really smart. I mean, being able to kind of do that, how they, compete with other companies that kind of do that. And I say kind of because not very many people do that. So, I really am looking forward to working a little bit more closely with those guys and trying to, help at least on engineering review, if anything. I've tested companies' stuff way outside of DJI and Autel. I mean, I've tested tons of manufacturers from all over the place. And sometimes I have to just say, you're just not ready. You're just not ready. I don't think that's the case here at all. I think they're right there at 80%, and they understand that's the best part about it, that they have room to improve, and will hopefully, with your help and anybody else's help that's reviewing this, has the patience for that improvement. I'm looking forward to them.
I would say, just from my interpretation, the conversations I've had with ACSL, with you, with other people that have experience with the drone, the product might not be there. It may be at 70, 80%, whatever it needs to be. The company's there, though. Just their attitude and the way that they're moving forward. You can tell that as long as they make the right moves moving forward, they're going to be around. So, and I'm excited.
No reason to blow smoke up your butt. Moving on to now, where were we going to talk about some other?
There was another country that you mentioned on that list, and here it is, Malaysia. And the reason I bring up Malaysia is because there's been a very interesting development in the past 2-3 months, somewhere around there. And a lot of people have been catching buzz about this green drone that they're seeing on the internet, all over the internet. And you and I have shared some conversations about that, but I sort of want to just start by getting your interpretation of course, Anzu Robotics.
You always have to start with me, Chris? I mean, you always want to get your interpretation. Well, I don't want to just come swinging with a bat.
Hey, to take your own words from that ACSL conversation, people. I don't.
Okay. Well, let's look at the foundational problem with what our industry is currently facing right now. The non-supportive DJI, product lines, the inability to buy and get those. We go into country of origin being a major factor of that. And I wanted to bring in a little bit of history before I go into this about why I think it's kind of a thing, but at the same time, we've already been here, done that. We tried it. It didn't work, And so, I have my good friend, Bobby Sakaki, that used to work with me at Autel Robotics, I
love Bobby.
Yeah. And guess who hired us? Randall Warnes, Randall, was assigned the position of CEO, CEO of the company. And he put a team together. And one of the biggest things that we did, and this was post Randall leaving, by the way. I mean, Randall didn't quite get along with what was going on. I mean, who cares, whatever the reasons were. But he wasn't with Autel. But yeah, we had a mission to try and get onto the Blue 2.0 list. And Bobby was kind of the spearhead of that. When we went to Fort Benning to do our presentation at the DIU, of course, it was very successful. I mean, the drone flew exactly how it was supposed to fly. It did, a bunch of guys with checkboards, like, wow, that, check. But when we get back to the review, back to the room for post questions, the first one that came up is like, where are you manufactured? I wanted to roll my eyes at that, just like, and I'm Autel, we're made in China. So, all of that started to go. Well, then there was discussion there that Bobby had said, well, we have the coding and architecture and the possibility to have a MAVLink interpreter that could just tell the main architecture code, because that's really hard to try and just wipe clean and rewrite code on an aircraft that already exists, right? It is not easy to do. And I know this for a fact because of what I've dealt with DJI and trying to get into their source code, and then as well Autel that also keeps their source code pretty locked tight. if you tried to wipe it clean, well, you got a bunch of really dumb hardware. It doesn't, that base code has to somehow exist. It has to. And unless you're going to spend multiple millions of dollars with engineers to recreate that, that's really hard. So what we had proposed, instead of doing that, which would be very costly, to rewrite the whole coding of a piece of hardware, is to have a MAVLink interpreter, that which most of the Blue UAS was MAVLink approved, and MAVLink systems okay, transmission systems, everything else. But they were like, no. Not no on the idea, but no on, well, who would fund that? Well, China would. Well, you can't do that. Well, what if we did manufacturing here in the United States? What if we had a whole bunch of Americans that actually put all this stuff together and then put the source code on there, or at least built this thing? And well, where does the money come from? Well, from China. Yeah, we can't do that. Yeah. So the whole thing was, where does the money go? Who makes profitability off of it? And if it has anything to do with China, that's what I was hearing. I was not hearing data security issues. I was not hearing a solution to break apart the MAVLink between the source code. I was just hearing, you can't have any money from China.
That's, let's just call a spade. I don't think any of this from beginning to end has really been about data security. I think it's a really nice scare phrase that you can throw out there that everybody sinks their teeth into. I think it has very, very little to do with that, and more so has to do with the money. That's what I think it comes down to.
All right, so we're back to the money. I mean, when we go to the money and we ask for money to buy a new, whatever drone. And again, back when it wasn't a big deal that you could buy DJI, there was no problem. It was on the GSA. It was on GSA. That's like government. All DJI drones were there. You could use government money, purchase it. You didn't even have to go through a dealer. You just, if you know what the GSA model is, it's a very simple way to do transaction purchases and everything else with on an approved list. All products were there that were DJI. Every single one of them lived on that site. Yes. However, yes, we all of a sudden had a pinch against it and said we don't want that no more. So it became difficult to purchase and buy. Well, then in others, cities, states, or whatever started to also say, hey, we don't want to, support the purchase of DJI drones or Chinese drones. We have the data security thing, but really, honestly, we don't want to use our federal money to buy Chinese stuff, and put it out there with that whole premise of, well, it's data, So, but essentially, NDAA and to be on the blue has a little bit of things in order to get money. And that's just the way it is. If you want to submit for money, if it doesn't comply with NDAA, then it's difficult to get the money. If you want to get blue, which is an entirely different, set of rules and set of requirements, and you want money for blue, if it doesn't hit the blue, then you can't get the money. So it's a money game again. We're back to a money problem. All right.
Yes.
So it's not, if you introduce now this new Anzu, let's say it right now, Anzu.
Anzu? Is it Anzu?
Anzu. I just call it the green monster. So if you introduce it, but by the way, Randall, that's my coining right there, the green monster. So if you want to put your money on the green monster, we have to be a little careful here, because again, as Randall has said in other interviews that I watched, it is not NDAA and it is not blue approved. And where, again, I get kind of where I'm trying to understand, what is it going to solve then? If it doesn't have those two things where you have to ask money, what does it help with? Well, it helps with data security. Okay, well, we're back to, it's a DJI drone. You cannot deny that. I don't care what you say. It doesn't matter what you argue with me. It's made in a different country. Great. Autel does the same thing. Chinese engineers, Chinese sources, source code, anything. Manufactured, made, assembled in Vietnam. They do the same thing, but they still don't comply. Why don't they comply? So you take a bunch of DJI cells, you paint them green. It's still a Mavic. It acts like a Mavic. You put American software on there, and I say that in quotations because what's DroneSense? Is that American software?
No.
DroneSense, American? Yeah, it is.
Well, Yeah. Go. No. Yeah. I guess it is,
That's
isn't it?
Yeah, that's American software. Any of the Pix4D stuff is somehow American, if not NATO approved. All of the drone deploy stuff is all anything that you put on there that runs SDK that was made in America doesn't make any difference. Oh, but it's made in Malaysia. Made like they make the drone from ground zero. They produce all of the lenses. They produce all of the sensors. They write all of the code. Okay, sure. I'll buy it, I guess.
Yeah.
But what I have noticed is that the thunder behind it, the support behind it, is pretty unreal. And I'm not trying to bash on Randall at all or trying to make a dent, but I believe that this is going to be nothing more than a Band-Aid. Nothing more than a Band-Aid.
So first of all, I agree. I don't want to bash Randall. I've spoken to Randall twice, I think, in my life, and both times super nice dude, like very cool. I do want to throw an apology out to Randall. I was supposed to connect with him at Xponential, but I think you were the one that ended up taking care of that. So
yeah, but it was kind of a catch up on like, hey, how are you? Good. Hey, blah, 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 brotherly love, whatever. We didn't talk about tech at all.
Randall, if you are watching this, we will connect in some way, shape, or form in the near future. But I think that mass appeal and that push really comes from the fact that at first glance, you see Mavic 3. That's what you see. Mavic 3 Enterprise, I should be more specific, because the Raptor drones is what they're calling them. It comes in the Raptor and then the Raptor T, which is thermal. I really think that people, and again, this is sort of a nice reveal as to where we're at in the industry. People are afraid because right now, you've got agencies, you've got organizations, you've got businesses that are depending upon DJI technology. It's something they're familiar with. It's something that they can depend upon. And it's something that does the job better than anything else out there. And you can quote me on that. But now they're faced with possibly losing that. So the idea that they could potentially be walking into a platform here that solves those problems for them and offers the same level of performance, super appealing. And I think it's not so much that it's been proven that this hype is real. It's more so I think there's a lot of people that want it to be real.
It's 100%. People want it to be real.
Yep.
But I also want to be fair in saying that people get sucked into this really quick.
Yeah.
We certainly do as human beings. And with that being said, of like, hopefully it's going to solve the world and what it's going to make. Well, what happens when we run out of the Mavic 3 capabilities, and now there's a Mavic 4 that just kicks butt.
Right.
Well, does that mean we're doing this? We're going to have a green machine that looks just like a Mavic 4? But it's
a great question.
But what else are they going to produce and make if they make their own? What else does this company make if they make their own? If it's not a DJI clone, it's actually a DJI brought over from China. If they make it in Malaysia, what else are they planning on making that the radio doesn't look exactly like a DJI radio and the aircraft doesn't look exactly like a DJI aircraft, and it doesn't have source code on there to run PSDK or a SDK exactly like a DJI aircraft? I'm confused. I'm like uberly confused. But jump on the bandwagon. Let's see what happens. I know that people are hell-bent on, testing it, checking it, and everything else. But, if you're asking questions on what it does or how it performs, well, the only question you should have is what does a loft give you versus DJI Pilot? That's the only question. Those are the only differences that are going to really be there. A loft software versus DJI software that's running on the device. What is a loft going to be able to put in there that would be better or more enhancing or more capable than DJI's root software,
But and to me, like, and again, that's sort of where I'm sort of like with you. Let's wait and see. Is the performance, the tangible things that we can only see when it's used out in the field. Like that's jury's still out on that. But the thing that really I keep coming back to, and my mind's still wrapped around it, is exactly what you said earlier. It's not NDAA. It's not blue. So who would this even appeal to? Why would you pay, and I can't remember the prices off the top of my head, but why would you pay for a Raptor when you could just go get a Mavic? What is the thing that stands out if it doesn't allow you to use it on a federal or state level?
Said, I mean, I'm still trying to get it to figure it out. I'm still trying to be like, what is everyone so up in arms about? I mean, if you can't buy it with NDA money, you can't buy it with blue money, well, then what money do you buy it with? Well, you buy it with normal money. Well, what is normal money? Money that you ask from the community. And, is it flying around? Does it allow me? So here's a great question, being that you're a drone service provider. I mean, that's what you do. Yeah. Would you buy this because now that you've got a stamp of approval from a contractor or a possible contract that you had that now allows you to fly the Green Monster around instead of a Mavic, because you couldn't fly the Mavic. Yeah. So, but why couldn't we fly the Mavic? The perception said they're stealing our data. Okay, right. So this is supposed to be really secure. So now it's approved. Well, who approves that? Who's going to approve that? Who's going to give you the checkbox that we went through the Anzu? We checked with, Aloft. They said it was really secure. They said it's trusted. They said all this stuff, so it must be good. And would you buy it? You personally buy it so that you can do work with a trusted piece of equipment?
I mean, if you look at, and this is sort of like, I'll answer your questions straight on. Yes. If I had the check boxes and it said, hey, this $100,000 year-long contract that you got with this agency, you can only have access to that if you purchase this product. Yeah. As a business owner, I'm going to look at that and go, $7,000 or whatever the price is for 100,000, that's a no-brainer. But for somebody like me, and I think there's more people like me as a service provider than there are those people that are getting those big contracts they can sink their teeth into and sort of depend upon. No. And the reason I say that is because I don't, as an independent drone service provider, do enough work in that realm. I try to get those jobs, but it's just a different game altogether to get those contracts than it is to go to a private organization and go, hey, I see that you need, this measured, or I see that you need video, or I see that you need photo, whatever the case may be. Way easier, way less overhead because I can accomplish it with less. So there is a really, in my opinion, a niche sector of DSPs that are going to be interested in this and ready and willing and able enough to just go ahead and drop the cash on it immediately. Yeah,
I think it's kind of interrupting or disrupting the public safety side of things, because they think, again, it's going to be, the solve-all to ask for money and get this. It is more expensive than the clone. I don't know who's cloning who, but it's basically, it's more expensive than the DJI, but I am curious to see how it goes. That's all we're going to have to do is wait and see what it gets out in the field, how it performs, what Aloft, like I said, Aloft is a major component in this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not saying that Randall doesn't know, enough about, that company and who they are and what they are. But, we've tried to work, not tried, we've worked with Aloft at Autel. I mean, I've been there for 2.5 years. I had been there for 2.5 years. That even trying to get Aloft to kind of work with the Autel stuff was kind of challenging. And that was just challenging on SDK in general. Our side wasn't really good at communicating. Their side was really high expectation. They wanted it to, believe it or not, they wanted a lot of the functionality, and most of the SDK developers want the functionality like DJI does. They want an easy to use SDK, easy to develop on SDK.
Yeah.
Autel doesn't have an easy developed SDK, and I can be honest about that. It's very complicated. It's a little bit more, messy, if you will. And if anything, it's kind of sourced. A lot of the main stuff is kind of sourced as copying a little bit of DJI. And I love Autel stuff. I've been happy with what products they put out so far. There was a reason why I left, but again, we're back to the what's the difference between Vietnam made, Chinese not, who buys what, American company owns it but not, once people get it, if they can get it with purchasing, what makes it any different? And I hope that solves a problem for some people, but let's see what they make next, and if it's anything, a copy of something else, then they do not manufacture anything.
Right. No, exactly.
That's all I'll say.
And I'll say this as a quick and very light criticism to Randall. There's a part of me, as I saw, and I understand why they went with the design that they went with the Raptors. There was a part of me, though, that was disappointed it wasn't a Phantom. Just because I missed that build, I missed that body. It would have been real. You might have got me to buy in immediately if it was a Phantom. But I would have been like, yeah, let's do it.
A green Phantom? You would have bought a green Phantom?
Man, you know what? I'll say this, and there may be a lot of people that disagree with me. I think a green Phantom would have looked better than a green Mavic. That's all I'm saying. I'll leave it at that. No hard feelings, but that's just what I think.
Well, we laid into what AUVSI was and how we had a great time coming together. I think as a droning company group, I think we did a really fantastic job. Again, thank you, Stuart, for organizing and making sure that we all showed up and did our thing. He was also fantastic. He was able to jump on the stage and play with Houston Bernard, a guy out of Oklahoma. It was really cool to see that guy just rip the guitar. That old guy just that guy's been playing guitar longer than I've been alive. How's that?
No, for real. And what's funny is I used to work at a classic rock radio station near my hometown, and we played a lot of Sweet. And so when I met Stuart and he said, I used to play lead guitar for Sweet, I was just sitting there and I was like, I listen to your music all the time.
What did you say?
I'm sorry, what? No, but knowing him Stuart's been business partner and friend of mine now for 3 years. And so knowing him for that long, I knew he could shred. But actually sitting there, I've never seen him actually play with a band. And so sitting there and watching him play, it takes it to a whole new level. It was so cool. It was maybe the highlight of that evening. And I got a chance to fly during that show. So during that meetup. So that says something. I mean, Stuart playing the guitar was really cool.
Yeah. And I did want to give a shout out to Adrian Doko for putting that whole part of that autonomy together. Yeah. The challenge was the weather to get the drone show. So unfortunately we didn't get that up and going. But, I thought overall just that this year at AUVSI was pretty good. Again, it gave me an opportunity to connect with a lot of the people I hadn't seen for a while, be able to kind of see what was semi-innovative. The drones in school thing I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. And, and I did for a minute catch Randall, out in the social area, everybody's out there having a good time. And again, we talked for a minute, but it was just great to see everybody and hang out. And great to actually meet you and everyone else in person. At least I know we've met each other in person, but actually like hang out and do something in the house. I thought it was pretty fun. It
was cool. The last time that I actually non-work related actually hung out with you, and it sort of still was semi-work related, was last year at Xponential in Denver. I got the chance. Billy, Kyle, Ken Dono, they sort of brought me into the fold with that group you guys were hanging out with, and it was really cool to meet you then. And fast forward a year later, and we're actually working together and getting to spend a lot of time together. It was a ton of fun. And Tim Brazel posted something on his Instagram story. It was a video of Hudson doing push-ups while Sam flew my FPV drone underneath him while he was doing push-ups. I was sitting there editing videos, and it just sort of it reminded me, it still would have been fun no matter what, but we had way more fun because of the group that we had there. It was a great show.
Yeah, I think so. So we have a lot to work on, a lot to have fun with. We'll do a lot more of these podcasts, of course, and we'll what would be helpful is if anybody was in the comments, if there's anything that's kind of hot to trot, let us know, things and topics that we could talk about, being that this is the very first one and kind of the debut of it. And again, I really appreciate you putting this together there, and looking forward to doing a few more with you, Bub.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely looking forward to that. And just to sort of tease anybody that's listening to this on Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, whatever the case may be, or watching this on YouTube, next guest, I've already got it sort of lined up. Not totally official, but we're like 99% of the way there. Wayne Baker from DJI. So we will have Wayne on in the next episode of this podcast. Really looking forward to having him on and talk to him about some of the stuff he's got going on. So yeah, always good hanging out with you, John. Really enjoyed just talking with you about AUVSI. can't wait to see what the next few months has to hold, because I think it's going to be a lot of changing in the world of drones, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Chris.
Yeah, of course. Just a reminder, anybody, again, watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you follow our show. We'll be posting this as regularly as we can. And again, if you have any contributions you'd like to make in the comments about what we talked about during this podcast or ideas for future podcasts, feel free to share them. We really, really appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Chris the Drone Geek. That's Jon McBride. We're out of here. See ya.